We're live on YouTube. Hello, friends. We're going to be doing office hours right now. It's a little bit later than usual, so I apologize for the wait. But if you're not familiar with office hours, basically it is your opportunity to ask me questions. It's how I maintain some order in my life so that folks don't ask me questions constantly, and instead I can just say, hey, go to office hours, and I can just answer them all at once. And it ends up working out a lot better. And this is all recorded, so people can go watch it later. So let me share my screen here. And with with the way that office hours works is I answer your questions in Zoom. So you're welcome to join the Zoom. There's a link there. Or you can ask questions in the Discord at any time. You just stick them in there, and I will just go through these when I'm done with answering questions from people in Zoom. So that's how that works. I don't think I need to say anymore. So what questions do you have for me?
Hi, Kent.
Hi, Peter.
I just wrote in the in Discord.
This one?
Yep. So how would you read this code if you didn't have any keyboard and you
Yeah,
had
and
to talk about
I
it?
read through this. So the goal is to explain how the type inference is working. Sort of. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, if I were going to explain how what's going on in this code, I would say, okay.
Oh wait, I pasted wrong code. Oh yeah, you can probably explain how type inference works, and I will try to copy the correct code
sure.
for generics.
Yeah, no worries. So here we have this result, and we're calling check cat and assigning that to this result. We're passing a status of alive as a string to this check cat, and then here our function accepts that object, which has to be of type cat. So our type cat can have a status of dead or alive, and then we simply return what that status is. And so because the function can only accept an object that has a object with a property of status, dead or alive, then we know that TypeScript knows that cat.status can only be dead or alive, and that's why the result inferred type is either dead or alive. Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, so now
sort of, but then we have generic,
version.
the generic version. So yeah, cool. So so yeah, I guess I haven't looked at your blog post yet, but I'm guessing you're saying, hey, so we've got this, and it's interesting that we can have dead or alive, but what if like the fact is that I know that this is alive, so the result must absolutely be alive. I don't want it to be dead or alive. And so with this, we have a type generic where we're saying the status can be either dead or alive. And then we're going, TypeScript will either accept the argument, a generic argument. I don't know what you call this thing. So if we were to say check cat with an open bracket and then specify the type availability, so what that type is, then TypeScript would just say, oh, okay, so that's what the status is. It's going to be whatever they passed. But if you don't do that, then TypeScript also has this feature where you can specify a argument and assign the or associate the generic type with the argument's type. And so here we have our argument of cat, and we say, hey, this cat is going to be a cat of type status. So a type of cat of type status, where cat is also a generic, and we're passing the status along, and the possible status value is whatever that status type is. So in our case, because we're calling this check cat function with an object that has a status of alive, that comes along for the ride in here when TypeScript says, okay, so what could this cat status type be? Well, I am not getting an argument for the generic, so I'm just going to assume what the type for this status is for this cat. So it's going to end up being the status of just the one string that we provided here. That there are a lot of words in there. I could probably tighten that up, but that's sort of how I'd, without seeing this until now, that's kind of how I'd explain it, I guess.
Yeah, thanks. That's exactly, I wanted to hear some second opinion. If there is some short way to describe it, there is not.
Yeah. So I maybe when I get to actually teaching TypeScript, I'll be able to find more terse ways to explain this sort of thing. Clearly, I haven't taught this before, so yeah, that's good. Thanks for the question. Yeah, that was kind of a fun exercise. Yeah,
Thanks.
I will definitely be teaching this sort of thing, so it's good for me to practice how to do that too. Good. Anyone else in Zoom have a question before I dive into the questions in Discord? Okay, sweet. So coming back up here, yeah, we had a little conversation last week. Yeah, okay, sweet. And just as a fun fact on this latest ref pattern, I was going to write that blog post last week or earlier this week, and ended up writing a different blog post, because I was like, okay, well, they need to understand this thing first. And then it turned out, oh, this preparatory information is basically a blog post. So I turned that into a blog post. But it turns out that this blog post isn't actually about closures. I need to rewrite this or either retitle it or come up with a different example, because this is the fact that where is it? Yeah. So the fact that arg is closed over in this logger is not the reason that this is not working the way that it should, or that we would want it to, because we're reassigning this fruit variable, which is not closed over at all. Like it's basically like reassigning or making another variable and assigning it to the first variable. So we're taking this arg and assigning it to the fruit, and then we reassign the fruit, and that has nothing to do with closures. So I need to come up with a different example here, or either do that or retitle the post. Anyway, fun little fact. Jens has several questions about Remix, because Jens is thinking about getting a license for Remix and wants to make sure that Remix can satisfy all cases or use cases. So what do you get when you buy Remix? You don't get access to the source code, but when you download it, it's not minified or anything. So I have gone through and seen it is compiled, but it's not minified. And it's like the compilation is pretty light. They do write it. It's authored in TypeScript, I believe. So you'll notice some funny things there, but for the most part, it's actually pretty readable. But yeah, you don't get the source code. You just can download it. They give you a token that you can use to put in your npm rc, where you say, hey, when I'm downloading at Remix packages, use this package manage or this registry. They have their own registry that is just a proxy to the GitHub registry where they publish it, so they can have a private package and allow you to access it. Works out really nicely. There were a few kinks when we were getting started, but I like the way that I have it set up for my website. And yeah, you also get access to the Remix docs naturally. And that's not open source right now. They may open source the docs in the future, but yeah, right now it's not. Remix has loaders, which you can use to load data server side for the page. And Next has get static props. So get static props and loaders are a little different. So and maybe I'm missing this. I think that loaders are a little closer to get server side or server props, I think is what it's called, where it's like get static props. I feel like it's more yeah, I actually, it's been such a long time since I've used Next, I can't remember. But yeah, it's not exactly the same, but let's continue here. Nuance is boring. Does Remix have a way to create request handlers for certain routes within my app where I can respond with JSON? Okay, yeah. So API routes, basically. Yes, so this is possible. They don't have patterns for it, but they have like recommended things to try. And eventually, if there's if some common patterns emerge, then they'll make abstractions to simplify those common patterns. But if you look at my Remix site and go to, it's an app, and then here we have entry server. So this is the first thing that is run when a request comes in. In here, we can handle the request. And in here, this is pretty much like standard Remix server handler. But what I think is really unique and interesting about this is that you're responsible for what you return in the markup, or like what you return for a given request, which means that you have total power over everything. You can decide all the things that you want to do with this request. So I could do an early exit here. I could say, hey, if the request URL is, in fact, I have a use case for this for an RSS feed on my blog. So if it ends in /feed.xml or rss.xml, then do a totally different thing and return a totally different response. Don't even use Remix, for example. So that's something I'm planning on doing eventually. So yeah, because you have all control, then that's a thing you can do. Now, it can be useful to co-locate stuff, right? So you want to say, here's the file, and then here's a endpoint that I want to hit from the client side, and hit that endpoint for an infinite scroll or whatever you want to do there. Each of your route modules. So here's a, let's see, contact. Here's a route module. You have an action. This is probably a bad example because I'm abstracting away here. How about login? Still kind of working on this one, but yeah, so you have a loader function, you have an action. You also have a handler, which allows you to export basically a completely arbitrary anything that you want to from this. And I think, yeah, I think that's all. It's just, it allows you to export anything that you want to. The idea behind it was for breadcrumbs, so that you could say, hey, like, give me all of the different routes that match and give me some information about them, and then you can export those on handlers. They have an example. I haven't used it, so I don't remember. But anyway, with the handler API, you could export a some mechanism to have like an API endpoint or something, and then your handler would return a response that that you then use in your server entry. Yeah, and so this would say, okay, well, get me the route that matches. Does it have a handler? Sweet. Then let's call that handler and return whatever response it returns. So yeah, this is totally supported, and definitely likely. I'm guessing that in the future there will be patterns that emerge that could potentially be abstracted. I'm not sure how much boilerplate there will be, actually. I don't think there will be much, so may not be necessary. But yeah, totally possible. And today, with no changes to Remix. Any preference on how to set up CI with GitHub Actions? When CI fails, I want to make it easy as possible for the developers to see what's wrong. I'm using a single job called Validate. Yeah, and so the reason that I like using a single job, this isn't just like a Remix thing at all. This is all just the way that I do GitHub Actions. I like having a single job because it means that I can go one after the other, and then I have one script right here that can run things in parallel that I need in parallel. If you do separate jobs, then you have to do all of these steps over and over with each job. You have to check out the repo, you have to set up Node. Those two steps are really fast, but you have to do them. And then you have to install dependencies. If you have it cached, then maybe it's okay, but it still takes time. And I don't like having to do that. And especially if some of your jobs depend on other parts of the job, like for example, to deploy, I have to build. And so like, I don't want to have to do that over and over again. And to run Cypress, I also have to build. So if I like, sure, maybe I can parallelize it, but am I really getting anything out of that when I have to run the build for every single one of them anyway? So I prefer having a single job. Now, if I had just a huge suite of Cypress tests or something that took a long time, then yeah, sure, I'd want to parallelize all of those. But at this point, I don't. I have like one Cypress test for this just to make sure that it pulls up. And eventually, I'm sure I will. Yeah, so like eventually maybe it would make sense for me to split this up so I can parallelize some of this stuff, especially like end-to-end tests is a really great use case for that sort of thing. Yeah, as of right now, I'm happy just having a single giant validate script. So will Remix eventually come with fast refresh? Yeah, I think so. A couple weeks ago, I would have said absolutely it will come with fast refresh eventually. But they are in the very next version, they're switching to ES build, which means, as your next question alludes to, there are some pros and cons to ES build. An enormous pro is that like it doesn't matter how big your code base is, it is going to be outrageously fast. Like it is nuts how fast ES build is. We're talking sub-second for really big projects. I can't even believe it. It's outrageous. So anyway, they will have very, very fast builds because of ES build. The trade-off there is I just recently, like yesterday, read in the ES build FAQ that, or let's see, hot module, they had a list of things that they will not do, and that includes hot module reloading. So fast refresh requires hot module reloading. So it's unlikely that will ever happen because it's explicitly said that they're not planning on adding that. It's possible that a plugin could enable that. So I'm not going to say it's never going to happen, but it's probably not going to happen. For myself, I actually don't like HMR. I think I never trusted it. I always refreshed anyway. So they probably will have the ability to do a live reload or something. You can add that yourself even. That's not a hard thing to do. Yeah, but that's not something that I'm sure what direction they're going to go on with that. Yeah, I never liked it. I even in Code Sandbox, I didn't like it. Some people just love it though. So yeah, so it doesn't bother me, but it might bother you. Really, like it doesn't, who cares? I don't know. Like it does bother me sometimes that I have to refresh myself, sort of. But that's an easy thing to solve with the live reload little script that you can set up really easily. And then they'll probably have either an example of how to get that set up or they'll have it baked in. Okay. I heard you mention Remix will switch to ES Build. ES Build does not support CSS modules. I believe that ES Build is going to support CSS modules. They're going to support the CSS content type. I feel like I saw something about, yeah, there we go. I plan to also implement CSS modules. So that is going to happen. Yeah, this was back in December. Yeah, so eventually this is going to be a thing. It's not one right now. Here's the thing with one of the reasons that CSS modules is useful is because you get CSS variable or CSS class name munging or whatever, so that you can't run into conflicts and stuff. Remix has this problem much less because each page can have its own CSS file associated with it. And when that page isn't on the screen, that CSS isn't there either. So that CSS gets removed. And so you get automatic scoping of your CSS, not because there's some like funny name mangling, but because that CSS is removed from the page. And that is because you have control over what link tags are on the page. And so you say, hey, Remix, here are the link tags I want for this route. And when that route's not there, those link tags are gone. So like, this is a thing that you can do. You can add a link or a style sheet to the page and all the styles apply. Then you can remove it from the page and those styles go away. And because it's cached, you can like go back and forth and they get added and removed and it's really fast. That's not a problem. And so it ends up that basically means that you don't need to worry about like different pages CSS messing up with each other at all. Now, when we're talking about nested routing, which nobody enjoys except Remix folks, but when we're talking about nested routing, yeah, if there's a parent that has some CSS and then a child down here that has some CSS, then you need to be concerned about any conflicts there. But yeah, I just don't see that as a practical thing. The other thing is I'm just using Tailwind for everything, so I don't care. And it's great. But yeah, so answer is yes, CSS modules are probably coming because of ES Build. No, they're not supported today. Even I don't think, can't remember if Remix supports them today. But in the next version, it will just depend on ES Build anyway. And most of the time you don't need CSS modules anyway. So there's that. So Jens also noticed that some of my files in where is it? KCD Remix. Some of these files end in .server. This is just a clue to the Remix compiler that these files are only used on the server. And so when I go to a page like, let's see, like my blog here, nope, bad example. Let me think, MDX. Yeah, okay. So this is a page that can be rendered on the server or the client, or can be used on the server or the client. Certain things like this 404 page. There are some bad abstractions in my app, but we'll figure all those out later. But some of these things can absolutely not be used or don't need to be used on the client at all. And Remix is pretty good at splitting those out. Like there's not really a problem. But as it's going through and determining, okay, like which files need to be tree shaken out or which functions need to go away, whatever, as it's determining which ones, it hinders the performance of the build. This may be less of a problem when, or probably not a problem when ES Build is a thing as part of Remix. It was supposed to come out yesterday, but it didn't, which is a bummer. But soon that will not be a problem. But anyway, it's just a way to say, hey, Remix, don't even bother with any of the exports from this file because it's just server stuff. So you can delete that import entirely, delete all imports from it, and any function in here that uses those, they're not going to the client either. You just get rid of all of those. So that's all the .server thing is. It's just a clue to the Remix compiler that we don't need these on the client. And you also have a client version as well. So you can have everything with like .client if you want. And it says, okay, this is only client stuff. So yeah, .server, only server stuff, .client, only client stuff. If it doesn't have one of those, then it can be both. And by that I mean there are things in it that can be client, there are things in it that can be server, or there are other things in it that can be both. So yeah. Yeah, okay, so the way I set up ESLint, I hate it. I hate the way that I set up ESLint, but I set it up this way because of the way I'm setting up my TypeScript. So I'm using project references because I need some different config for different parts of the code base, like the Cypress config needs to be different and stuff. And I'm unaware of a way to say, hey, here's the config for everything in this project. Oh, but this part of the project has a different config. I don't know how to do that without project references, and it's an all or nothing basically with project references. So, I mean, I guess what I probably could do is I could, actually, maybe I'll try this. I could have one project one project that's like, this handles everything, and then it just has an exclude for the special cases. And then we'll have a references that references the one that's good for everything, and then all the ones that are unique, because not all of these are unique. Like some of these are pretty much the same. So yeah, I may need to look into that, but because of the way that it's configured, ESLint also needs to know, okay, I'm in the app directory. Where is the TypeScript configuration for the files in here? And it's just in the ts config, but I do have to tell ESLint that, hey, the tsconfig root directory is here, and this is where that config file is, and then any overrides and stuff. It's kind of annoying. I don't like it, but it is what it is right now, and it's working. So I'm busy doing other things. Yeah, so one thing that would help a lot is if TypeScript config added the same overrides functionality that ESLint supports, where you can say, here's the config for everything, here's an override for this particular part of the project. Yeah, this is absolutely a good idea. Okay, sweet. Is there value in enabling this for Cypress? Yeah, I don't know, actually. I can't remember whether ESLint plugin testing library has support for Cypress stuff. I know that I do disable some features from ESLint plugin testing library because like I think there's the one rule that recommends you use screen instead of render, and that didn't work with Cypress or something like that. There were some rules that didn't work well with Cypress. So I know I've had to disable some rules for my Cypress tests. Yeah, I can't remember whether there's any value in using ESLint plugin testing library for Cypress. You'd have to look and see what rules might be useful. Config files written in TypeScript. I don't really care, honestly. I don't need everything to be written in TypeScript. I mean, having config files written in TypeScript could be useful, especially if the config is really complicated. But I mean, I don't touch config files very much. You write it, you see that it works, and then you move on with your life. I don't see a huge amount of value for writing config in TypeScript. Yeah, I don't really care. Sorry. Okay, Mohit. I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right. I apologize. I think you've told me before, so that makes that even worse. Sorry. Question regarding testing library React, as I bumped into this issue recently. Oh, yes. And Philip actually answered that. Thanks, Philip. Okay, sweet. I think that's all. So any questions in the Zoom?
Yeah, hi, Ken. This is Atish.
Hi there, Atish.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm also good. I just wanted to understand, like, so basically, I'm working on one of my application, and where I have an SSR leak, okay, a memory leak in my SSR app. So it's a Vue.js next app, but I just wanted to understand, like, do you have any blog post or something like that, like, which would help me find that memory leak, because I have used DevTools, okay, but it's not really that helpful. So if you have any
blog like the post, Chrome DevTools?
Yes, Chrome DevTools. So,
but and you've like hooked that up with your Node backend?
Yes. I have hooked that up with my Node backend, but the problem is that, like, the front-end app is running very easily, but the SSR server, it's just increasing the memory continuously, like, exponentially when there is a concurrent request. But the problem is that after those requests are gone, the memory usage doesn't goes down. It stays constant at that level only. So that indicates that there's a memory leak somewhere in the app.
So you mean that, like, so a request comes in, memory goes up, and when the request is sent, then all the memory comes back down again?
No. So let's say if I'm using, let's say, Apache Bench, okay, just to test, do a load balance, and I'm just performing, let's say, 20 requests per second for 1 minute. Okay, so initially my memory is somewhere around 100 to 150 MB usage. It spikes up to 700, 800 MB. But once those requests are completed, okay, stop the test, the memory usage is still at 700 only.
I see. Okay, gotcha. So it's hanging on to some objects and
yes,
there's something. Yeah, so since you've already used the DevTools, that's the only recommendation that I can give you. Without spending a bunch of time looking at it myself, I can't really say like where to look or anything. And honestly, server backend stuff is not where I've spent much of my time, so I don't have a lot of experience to go off of and say, oh, did you check this? So yeah, I'm sorry, I don't really know. Like I would in the memory profile here, if we go, so you're using this, right? And you
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I just record it. Then we basically check. I check the heap difference also, and the heap difference is also huge. I check the deltas also over there, which indicates like there are some old information. So I just wanted some guidance from your side. If you have some blogs written from your side, just and because it's just a server side rendering which is happening, so it's not a node application actually. So it's similar to React SSR that we would be using it, but it's just spiking up my backend server node application server over there. So
yeah, I don't know, beyond like playing around with this and saying, oh, okay, so this is coming from over here, and now I can see where that object is hanging out. And then you look at that and be like, oh, that's because this J is being used in some other, it's getting closed over by a closure or something, and so it can't get garbage collected. Yeah, but
okay,
I don't know.
cool. I'll just figure it out. If I found something, I'll just let you know in the next session.
Okay, cool. Yeah, good luck. Doesn't
Thanks.
sound like, I mean, it sounds kind of fun, but hopefully you're not under the gun or anything.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Man.
Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. Well, this is going to be a short one. I started late and we finished early. That's amazing. Normally these tend to go over. But you're always welcome to ask questions and bring it over to the KCD Office Hours. I'm happy to answer every week. Yeah, with that, that's Office Hours. Thanks, everybody.